You know that feeling when you have something special, but it's far away and you don't get to see it that often, which makes it even more special? Well, I did, and it was the best feeling in the world. My grandparents on my mother's side, and their dog, lived states away from my family and would take a whole day's travel just so we could see them. But when we got there, it was all worth it. I didn't get to see my grandparents but once or twice a year. I did have other grandparents on my father's side, or grandfather, as that grandmother had died shortly before I was born, lived only 45 minutes from my family, and we saw them every other week. Seeing them wasn't as special as seeing my grandparents on my mother's side, as we saw the ones on my father's side more often. When I did get to see my grandparents who were states away, my brother and I loved every minute. Well, most of the time. Sometimes were not so fun, like the time my brother slipped and started falling into the local river. He grabbed me to gain his footing, but instead pulled me in with him. The river was high, muddy, strong, and very cold that day. I was little, so it went a little higher than my chin as it rushed past me, almost dragging me with it as it flowed. It felt like hours till my dad pulled us out, but was only a few seconds. When I was propped solidly on the bank, far from the edge, I was freezing. Well, my head was, as I could not feel anything below my shoulders. Until a minute later when I started gaining feeling in my body. Then I shivered like nobody's business as my teeth chattered like those wind-up teeth. I felt gritty and wet as I slowly dragged myself to the car. I could taste dirt in my mouth, and as I looked at my brother at the end of the back seat, and tensions flared. I lunged for my brother, but my car seat and seatbelt restricted my attempt and brought pain to the area where the force of my movement would later produce a bruise. Not expecting such a reaction, my brother's eyes were wide, and he eyed me that way the entire drive back to my grandparents' house, and as soon as he could, he got as far away from me as possible. Days like that weren't exactly fun at the time, but when I look back, I just laugh. But soon, those days were over. When I was only 5, my grandmother died. I don't remember crying at her funeral, or any other time when I was that age. It partially could have been I couldn't believe she was really dead, or that I wasn't able to comprehend what was going on. Now I always will at least tear up if I think about it. Those day-long drives to visit my grandparents, well, grandfather, were never the same anymore. Sure, the visits were sometimes fun, but after a few years, things began to change again. It was hard for my grandfather to take care of the house and a dog alone, so every time we visited him, we started to pack up his stuff so he could be moved to a retirement community. I was 9 when he was settled in the retirement community. Personally, I'm not a big fan of change, so him moving out of his house was very upsetting, as it was such a cute house with a ton of character. The stained glass window in one of the bedrooms, the window seats in some of the bedrooms, the lacy curtains, and the beautiful sunroom. I never will forget that house. My grandfather was in the retirement community for only 2 years before he got very sick. His dog had to be boarded, which not much later my family took home so she would be cared for by family and not strangers. My grandfather was temporarily moved in the community to a place where he would get somewhat constant care and attention. In just a few months, he stopped breathing. My throat seemed to tighten and my nose began to run as I cried when I heard the news. I just couldn't believe that in about 4 to 5 years, I lost both of my favorite grandparents, which made me think of, at the moment, the universe being so cruel as to cause such a devastating blow to my heart. We traveled a day so we could prepare to go to his funeral, which would be a week later. How I wished we had traveled that far for something else. The more obvious reason, just to visit him. Just a few days after we arrived from the day of traveling, I got another hot her stop in shock. Well, being boarded, my grandfather's dog, well now my family's dog, Taffy, had died. She had choked. Though my favorite grandparents and their dog are dead, it never feels like they are actually gone. I believe just because something is gone doesn't mean it's gone mentally. I will never forget the memories we shared and how it felt to be in their presence. I think that they are always here with me and watching over me as I go on with my day. They will always be in my heart, and I will never forget them.